always feared are the creatures that haunt our nightmares, yet we ever seek to understand them. So turn the pages and see what lurks in the monster manual.
The world of Pokemon is one of peace and prosperity, a blend of modern and traditional with open arms. But darker things lurk in the fringes of the world, beasts of ancient and terrifying power, creatures that have shaped the cosmos and hold the power of gods.
Jacob, what are you doing? Pokemon isn't even scary.
But there are few that inspire more mystery than the Old Testament weather trio. You know, she's right. Pokemon just isn't all that scary. Time for a change of roles. That's better. Now, what was your name again?
Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza are the legendary trio of HOENN, the region in which Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, as well as the upcoming Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire remakes, occur. Fans have dubbed them the Weather Trio as they all have some sort of impact on the weather. Ain't that clever? After the creation of the world by Arceus, who is essentially the Pokemon god, Kyogre is formed by pressure in the deep sea trenches. Groudon is formed deep inside the world from magma and earth, and Rayquaza is formed by minerals of the ozone layer. Groudon is said in legend to have created the land and expanded the continents, and he even supposedly saved the ancient peoples of the world from floods by scattering rain clouds and evaporating the water. It sleeps deep underground in
liquid hot magma
ever since its mythical, cataclysmic battle with Kyogre. In Pokemon Ruby, the player first encounters Groudon in Seafloor Cavern, an underwater cave deep beneath the sea in Route 128. Here, Team Magma, the antagonist of Ruby, seek to wake Groudon from his slumber and control him with a blue orb, using it as part of their plot to, lower the sea level and create more habitats for land Pokemon? Oh no, how evil. What they don't realize is that the blue orb actually controls Kyogre, not Groudon, who is controlled by the red orb in the player's possession. Because that's really hard to figure out. So they wake Groudon, and unable to control it, the creature flees from the cavern, causing the sun to burn so brightly that it's dangerous. The player must now enter the Cave of Origin in Sootopolis City, battling their way down to the lowest floor where Groudon awaits. The player activates the red orb, and after a fierce encounter with the beast, or a throw of the Master Ball, the player captures Groudon and saves the world from being scorched to nothingness. Groudon's counterpart and nemesis, Kyogre, created the sea in legend with torrential downpours and tidal waves, as well as saving the ancient peoples from droughts. I'm not sure how the ancient people of HOENN had droughts and flooding, but if it's in the game, it's gotta be right. Those poor people, it's like every one of them is Tantalus. In Sapphire, Kyogre takes the place of Groudon. Team Aqua, the antagonist of Sapphire and rival to Team Magma, wishes to control Kyogre to expand the sea and create more habitats for aquatic Pokemon.
Those bastards! Yes, my plot is to expand the world's nature reserves and populate them with animals!
But other than that, the same stuff happens. They use the wrong orb in Seafloor Cavern because they can't match colors. Kyogre escapes, summoning a deluge that will drown the world. Player has to go catch it in the Cave of Origin, save the world. Yay! In both Ruby and Sapphire, the player is unable to encounter the final member of the trio until after he or she defeats the Elite Four. After this, the player has access to the Sky Pillar, an ancient tower on an island in Route 131. Atop this tower waits Rayquaza, a Pokemon that, until now, has lived for hundreds of millions of years
in the protective layer around the world, which we call the ozone layer,
feeding off water and particles in the atmosphere, and unknown to man since it never descended to the ground. Rayquaza is incredibly powerful, and one tough fight the player used the Master Ball on one of the other legendaries. Now that's really all there is for these three in Ruby and Sapphire, but the story gets much more interesting in Emerald. Team Magma and Team Aqua are both active in Pokemon Emerald. Team Magma seeking to wake Groudon in the Magma hideout deep within Mount Chimney with the blue orb, and Team Aqua seeking to wake Kyogre in the seafloor cavern with the red orb. Both are successful in waking these beasts, and Kyogre and Groudon meet in the waters just outside Satopolis City to engage in a very Godzilla-esque battle, causing the weather to constantly shift between torrential downpours and scorching droughts. Good job, guys. You did it. The player quickly ascends the Sky Pillar to wake Rayquaza, who was said to descend to the ground when Kyogre and Groudon fight in order to put an end to their cataclysmic combat. Rayquaza immediately flies to Satopolis, quelling Kyogre and Groudon and sending them fleeing before returning to the Sky Pillar. Groudon and Kyogre, once the Elite Four are defeated, can now be encountered in the Terra and Marine caves respectively, both of which will appear and disappear in various locations if the player does not reach them quickly. Rayquaza can again be found at the Sky Pillar, this time waiting for a fight. After the events of Emerald, the canonical game out of the three, Kyogre and Groudon flee to Fior, the land in which Pokemon Ranger takes place. In the post-game, Groudon can be found in the Jungle Relic, and Kyogre in the Sapphire Sea, both with injuries suggested to be from the other legendary Pokemon, a reference to their battle in Emerald. Rayquaza too can later be found at the Fior Temple, with the Go Rock squad harassing it and trying to capture it. They fail, of course, and the Ranger comes to quell the enraged Rayquaza. Rayquaza likely followed Kyogre and Groudon to Fior to ensure that they did not engage in combat again. The Weather Trio also make an appearance in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Once the player has attained the National Pokédex, Mr. Pokemon grants the player the Red Orb in Soul Silver and the Blue Orb in Heart Gold. The player then gains access to the Embedded Tower on Route 47, a rune inscribed a mysterious building. If the player has the Red Orb, Groudon appears and the floor markings will be blue and mimic its arm patterns. If it's the Blue Orb, Kyogre appears and the floor markings will be red and mimic its fin patterns. If both legendaries are caught in the Embedded Tower and traded to the same game, Professor Oak will reward the player with the Jade Orb, and they can now encounter Rayquaza at the Embedded Tower, complete with yellow markings from its body on the floor. Because you're not allowed to be awesome unless you buy both versions. Or you could use a Game Shark, but you didn't hear it from me. The red and blue orbs were likely created by Arceus to prevent the reawakening of Kyogre and Groudon after their original fight, and they were left in Mount Pyre for safekeeping. Since the events of the second generation games actually occur after Emerald, it's reasonable to assume that Brendan or May, the protagonist of Emerald, entrusted the orbs to either Professor Oak or Mr. Pokemon after the events of the game. The orbs may work in conjunction with the Embedded Tower, with their combined force able to summon the legendaries. Each of the trio have their own signature abilities in combat to reflect their lore nature. Kyogre, the water-type sea-basin Pokemon, has the ability Drizzle, which summons rain that powers up water moves and weakens fire moves whenever it enters the battle, and it won't dissipate until another weather-changing ability or move is introduced. But seriously, Drizzle? Doesn't this look like a little more than a drizzle?
It's just drizzling out here, it'll be fine.
Groudon, the ground-type continent Pokemon, has the mirror image of this ability, Drought, a much more name-fitting ability which summons sunlight that buffs fire moves and weakens water moves. Rayquaza, true to the lore, has the ability Airlock, which dissipates all weather effects when it enters combat. There's some other cool things about Rayquaza that reflect the lore as well. Its Dragon Flying typing gives it resistance or immunity to the primary elements of the other two legendaries, Kyogre's water attacks and Groudon's fire and ground attacks. Additionally, while Kyogre and Groudon both have a base stat total of 670, Kyogre with better defenses and Groudon with higher attack power, Rayquaza has a total of 680, making it more powerful stat-wise than both. And come on, look at him, he's freaking awesome. Who wants a whale or a dinosaur when you have a dragon? We don't yet know how the story will evolve in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire remakes, but we do know that all three legendaries get an awesome upgrade. Both Kyogre and Groudon, using some unknown item, though I predict it will be related to the orbs, are able to undergo Primal Reversion, a feature similar to Mega Evolutions, and transform into Primal Kyogre and Primal Groudon. Primal Groudon gains a fire typing as well as ground, and an attack boost. He also gains the ability Desolate Land, which is similar to Drought but creates extremely harsh sunlight that negates water moves, and prevents other weather-changing abilities and moves from activating, and he will have the earth-shaking Precipice Blades attack. Kyogre gets a special attack buff, the ability Primordial Sea, which summons Heavy Rain.
Jason!
Shut up! Negating fire moves and weather-changing effects, and the terrifying Origin Pulse attack. Rayquaza doesn't get a Primal Reversion, but he does get a Mega Evolution. Mega Rayquaza, aside from looking even more awesome, gains the Delta Stream ability which summons strong winds that negate all weather effects and moves and abilities, and causes any move super effective against flying types to be normally effective. That means Mega Rayquaza will only be weak to Dragon and Fairy type moves, so that's pretty ridiculous. These new forms have me really excited for the new games, and I can't wait to see what else they bring to the table. Just about every Pokemon is based on some real creature or a legend of a creature, but would you believe me if I told you that the Weather Trio is based on Old Testament deities? Some of you may have heard of the names Leviathan and Behemoth. These names are incredibly popular in science fiction, and they date back to ancient Hebrew legends describing massive primordial beasts. In the Old Testament, Leviathan and Behemoth were great beasts and among the first of God's creations. Leviathan, typically depicted as a great serpent, held dominion over the seas and dwelled in the deep abyss. It was said to be 300 miles long with a ravenous hunger and a wrath to match, and its body, especially its eyes, were apparently bioluminescent. Behemoth was Leviathan's counterpart on the land, often depicted as a type of bull, rhino, elephant, or even hippo.
Oh god, it's a hippo! Run for your lives!
He held dominion over the land and dwelled in an invisible desert east of the Garden of Eden. Are the pieces beginning to fall into place yet? Later in Jewish lore, a third being was described that was only passingly mentioned in the Old Testament, Ziz. This griffin-like beast held dominion over the sky. So we have our mythological trio that directly parallels the Weather Trio, but the resemblances grow even further in the traditional lore of apocalyptic Judaism. Rabbinic myth sets forth that Ziz maintains the balance between the forces of Behemoth and Leviathan, preventing them from clashing and wreaking destruction across the world. However, it is said that Behemoth and Leviathan will engage in combat at the end of time that would ultimately kill them both, and the flesh of the two beasts would be served as a feast to the righteous in heaven. If you ignore the vaguely disgusting feast bit, this legend is a direct parallel to the lore of Kyogre, Groudon, and Rayquaza, so some incredible person at Nintendo reached way back into Old Testament lore to create these awe-inspiring beings. You may have noticed, however, that the Weather Trio don't really fit the physical descriptions of the primordial beasts. Kyogre has a very distinct whale and specifically orca-like appearance. However, in modern Hebrew, Leviathan actually translates to whale, so this is likely what they base the design on. Additionally, Kyogre's light-emitting markings reflect the bioluminescent description of the Leviathan. Groudon most certainly doesn't look like many of the beasts that have depicted Behemoth, instead looking more like a quadrupedal sauropod, specifically something from the genus Euplocephalus, notable for their flatter heads and wider bodies and tails and the ability to stand on 2 feet with the support of the tail. Interestingly though, creationists believe that the description of Behemoth's tail as being like a cedar tree is in reference to the tails of sauropods, flat, wide, and much larger than that of other extant mammals, although the timetable of the biblical events doesn't really match the dinosaur era. However, Groudon, including its tail, does fit the description. Rayquaza is easily the furthest from its mythological counterpart, as Ziz is consistently described as being much more bird-like. Rather, Rayquaza more closely resembles East Asian dragons, specifically the Shinlong, Tianlong, and Feilong, guardians of the skies and controllers of weather, which are bipedal, wingless, and constantly airborne, much like Rayquaza. And the tendrils of its mega evolution are reminiscent of the whiskers of Asian dragons. It also bears resemblance to the Norse lindworm, which were sometimes bipedal, wingless, and aerial, and Quetzalcoatl, a Mesoamerican deity depicted as a feathered, wingless serpent. Its name supports its Hebrew origins, however, likely coming from the word that I'm not even going to try to pronounce, which is Hebrew for firmament or the heavens. Kyogre's name likely comes from Kai, meaning ocean, and Orca, while Groudon's is likely a combination of ground and the common dinosaur suffix. So not only is the story of Rayquaza, Groudon, and Kyogre a direct parallel to the Old Testament, they themselves are also a blend of several cultural ideas.
So there we have it, an incredible parallel between Pokemon and Hebrew lore, with a few other legends mixed in, all brought to you by Professor Johnson. It's for this parallel that these 3 legendaries, Rayquaza in particular, are among my favorites, and I can't wait to see what they do with the lore in the upcoming remakes. So yeah, deep Old Testament stuff or not, this just wasn't that scary. I don't know what that Satan demon was all up in arms about. What? A power outage? Well, guess I have to record this late.
You think it's over, Nordic? Where's your holiday spirit?
You again? What do you want this time? I did as you asked, I read the book!
Yes, but you have yet to see what you unleashed.
No! Stay back! No!
Now for you pitiful creatures watching, this channel will be forever cursed to read the horrors of the Monster Manual every other video. So if you
Hey everybody, I know I'm dead or whatever, but I just wanted to take a moment to say a few things, so please hang around for just one more minute. First of all, thanks as always for watching, and thank you all for all of your support, truly. I can't tell you how much happiness you all bring me. I hope you enjoyed this new show, and be sure to tell me what you think of it, and ideas for future creatures of the Monster Manual. I don't plan on doing Pokemon again, except for maybe a legendary roundup, because I don't want the show to be just about Pokemon, but I thought this was a cool parallel and it seemed relevant with the remakes coming up in a couple weeks. By the way, if you like the music that you're hearing right now, as well as at the beginning of the episode, then why don't you click here to go check out Noteblock's channel. He made this Lavender Town remix especially for this episode, and it's damn good, so thank you again, my friend. He makes a number of amazing video game music remixes. I especially love his Bits and Pieces 8-bit medley, which is just a blast of nostalgia combined with amazing music, and frankly I haven't been able to stop listening to it for the past week or so definitely go check that out. An additional announcement, and I know some of you may not like this, but I have opened up a Patreon account for this channel, and I know that this kinda gets a bad rap, so let me explain. I'm not trying to make a profit, and I love making these shows, but I also put a lot of time into making them, and all of my expenses come out of pocket, including props and artwork. As a student who can only work on the summers, I really don't have much of an income and I don't have a whole lot of time to spare either, so it's more difficult for me to remain self-sufficient fueling the school and the channel simultaneously. I'm not asking anyone to pay for this channel, and even if you don't support me on Patreon, I will continue making these shows and giving you content. It's not conditional like that. However, if a handful of you pledge to donate even just $1 or so for every main video, and I'll exclude all side stuff from Patreon, you'll be helping me so much and I can't express my gratitude enough. For those of you who don't know, Patreon is a platform that lets you pledge a small amount of money for every video I add to the site, which for me will be the bag of holding in the Monster Manual. You can opt out at any point, and you can also set a cap on how much you'll donate in a month or year, in case I uncharacteristically go video crazy. In return for your help, I can promise more regular, more quality content, perpetually ad-free videos, and my supporters will have first priority in collaborations, participation in live streams, and hopefully other boons as this channel grows. Anything that you pledge on Patreon will be put towards the channel. I'm not going to take it on a spending spree. That being said, I absolutely do not require any of you to do this. Your support on YouTube just by watching and liking and sharing and enjoying is more than enough, and I can't thank you enough for it. But if you would like to help out a little more with this channel, Patreon is a wonderful tool with which to do it. Thanks for listening and your support, Thanes, and I'll see you next time. Happy Halloween!